Welcome to the 700 Club. It was one of the darkest days in the history of American democracy. 1 year ago today, angry protesters stormed the U.S. Capitol and tried to stop the certification of President-elect Joe Biden.
Since then, there have been investigations, security enhancements, and even prison time for some of those rioters. Still, America remains deeply divided and at risk for more attacks from within. Caitlin Burke explains.
On January 6, 2021, the world saw America's deep division on full display. In the aftermath of the Capitol riot, there was hope that unity would be restored. By many accounts, however, that hasn't been the case.
If you look at other incidents, 9/11, school shootings, we've been brought together as Americans. This is the first incident that hasn't happened.
Donnell Harvin served as D.C.'s chief of Homeland Security and Intelligence. That helped him see a dangerous increase in online chatter from armed militias and known radical groups prior to the events of January 6th. His office helping to prepare the local response.
I will go to my grave knowing that had it not been for the local authorities, that the Capitol would have fallen.
While security breakdowns on the federal level remain under investigation, Harvin says it's important that looking back doesn't distract from moving forward.
The radical elements that really want to tear apart this country are still there.
The responsibility to bring an end to violence and threats of violence against those who serve the public is one that all Americans share. We are all Americans. We must protect each other.
Security experts like Harvin worry that our divisive political environment will continue to provide a foothold for those radical elements.
The violence that we experienced on January 6th is decentralized and will go back to the states. And we see evidence of that already with election officials being threatened, public health officials being threatened, school officials being threatened.
Harvin says this leads him to believe that instead of targeting the nation's capital, the next threat will be directed at the state and local level.
Just from a Homeland Security and intelligence analysis standpoint, if those individuals and like-minded individuals who sought to stop the certification of the vote on the very, very last day they could, failed on January 6th. Indications are that they'll go further up in the voting cycle and try to stop people from actually casting their votes or stop the votes from being counted and certified at the state level.
Looking ahead, Harvin says it's imperative that we protect election officials while securing state houses and voting sites. Ultimately, though, he believes restoring national unity is the most important way to ensure the survival of American democracy. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Let me emphasize that united we stand and divided we fall. The Bible is quite clear. A house divided against itself cannot stand. We're losing our stature in the world. We're losing our unity. And last January 6th, we were in danger of losing our democracy. I remember this playing out over national television and just watching in horror as it unfolded right before my eyes. And it just drove me into a deep prayer. Coming out of that prayer, I had an unusual encounter. This isn't something that normally happens. There was an eagle at the end of a pier, and I managed to get a photograph of it. And the water, that's not a color corrected. There's no color added. That is the actual photo. The color is red, white, and blue, and you can see the eagle's feathers a little ruffled on the right side. But it just, the message I got is the Republic still stands. We still stand, but we've got to come together. Every other instance recently, whether it was Columbine or 9/11 or the 2008 crash, all of these things, we managed to come together. In fact, they were unifying events in our history. This past election cycle, everything with the COVID pandemic, we're divided over vaccines. We're even divided over whether you should wear a mask or not. Can we leave all of that behind and say, united we stand? Can we pray for unity? Can we stop all of the rhetoric, the division, trying to divide us on racial grounds, trying to divide us on religious grounds, trying to divide us on economic grounds, and say we need to stand together, because united we will stand, divided we will fall. In other news, the latest surge in Omicron is having a big impact on children. It's also creating a standoff in Chicago public schools. John Jessup has more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon, and really quickly, important words you said on United We Stand. Well, the rise in new cases includes an increase among children. The CDC has now lowered the age for vaccinations as well as boosters. Meanwhile, schools are debating whether to open up classrooms or go back online. Dale Hurd has the story.
While Omicron is clearly less dangerous than earlier variants, a nationwide spike in cases is closing some schools and has the CDC urging booster shots for kids as young as 12. Hospitals say the Omicron surge has been different because while more health workers are getting sick, leading to some staff shortages, most patients aren't as sick as those who came in during the last surge. Intensive care units aren't as full, and fewer ventilators are needed. But the rapid spread of Omicron has led Chicago public school leaders to cancel classes for the second straight day, after the teachers' union refused to return to the classroom, citing a lack of testing.
If you want to get us back into the schools quicker, provide testing.
We're trying to be practical for what makes the most sense for our district.
The U.S. Education Secretary is insisting that in-person learning is safe.
We have better tools now to keep our schools safe, including mitigation strategies that we know work. They worked before we had vaccines.
The CDC is now recommending not only vaccinations, but boosters for children and teens 12 and older, even though young people are considered at minimal risk from COVID. This comment was from a CDC panel discussion.
I think it will allow us to whack-a-mole for another month or two, but this is not sustainable, and it's not smart to think that we have to continue to boost to prevent infection or mildly symptomatic infection.
More than a third of 12 to 17-year-olds have not gotten their first shot. Meanwhile, a new study suggests that two widely used at-home COVID tests, the Abbott Binax Now and Quidel QuickView, do not detect some Omicron infections. But Israeli officials are touting a new study that claims to show a 5-fold jump in antibodies with a 4th Pfizer booster shot, although some researchers said repeat doses of the same vaccine could dampen the body's immune response. Meanwhile, tennis star Novak Djokovic, who has not been vaccinated, was told to leave Australia today, following a 10-hour standoff with government officials who rejected his medical exemption, possibly ending his chance to defend his title at the Australian Open. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Dale. Authorities in Philadelphia are investigating the cause of a tragic fire that left 12 people dead, including 8 children. The early morning fire swept through a crowded row house Wednesday. As many as 26 people lived in the 3-story building owned by the Philadelphia Housing Authority. Firefighters arrived at the scene to find the structure engulfed in heavy smoke and flames. They extinguished the blaze in less than an hour. Sadly, many residents did not get out, relatives praying and grieving at the scene.
My sisters and my nephews and my nieces are gone. They are deceased. They are never coming back anymore.
Keep all these folks, and especially these children, in your prayers. Losing so many kids is just devastating.
Authorities say at least 4 smoke detectors in the building did not go off. It was Philadelphia's deadliest residential fire in more than 100 years. Well, another winter storm is headed for the east. A blast of cold air hitting parts of the south last night. Tonight, a storm bringing snow to Tennessee and Virginia, then moving north along I-95, the same highway that was backed up for 27 hours earlier this week. The system expected to dump 2 to 6 inches of snow from D.C. to New York and Maine by Friday morning. Well, the stock market took a dip Wednesday on news the Federal Reserve will soon move to raise interest rates to fight inflation. Just released minutes from the Fed's December meeting show the board might raise rates as soon as March. The Fed citing spreading inflation for the move, but also noted that it believes the job market is strong enough to withstand the rate hikes. Well, the Labor Department's newly released numbers show a record quitting spree that may keep what's called the Great Resignation trending well into 2022. One analyst tells CBN News it's a sign of a healthy economy. CBN's Brody Carter explains.
4.5 million people resigned from their jobs in November, beating the previous record in September. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean these folks are leaving the workforce, but they are hoping for a better job. One analyst tells me this is an indication the workforce is strengthening.
Job quits, especially at record highs, are an indication of confidence within the consuming public and in the labor force in particular.
Economic advisors like Stephen Skanke believe this resignation rate means people feel secure enough to leave their jobs and find one that fits their needs.
There were 6.3 million people who left jobs. 4.5 million, as you point out, actually quit.
November also saw 6.7 million new hires. While that's 6% lower than October, it's a positive sign of movement and mobility in the job market. Hospitality and food services, which include many lower-paying jobs, got hit the hardest, with 261,000 people leaving their positions. Construction was next with 110,000, and manufacturing jobs lost 66,000 workers.
And they're migrating into job opportunities that have better pay, better recognition, less direct exposure with customers.
Skanke also points out some potential concerns. For example, more than 1 million working mothers have not returned to work since the start of the pandemic. The U.S. economy is facing record high inflation, and just Monday, the U.S. saw 1 million cases of COVID reported. Still, Skanke says people leaving their jobs shows a strong heartbeat in the workforce.
Quitting your job before you have another one, or even quitting your job after you have another one, shows a degree of confidence and adventuresomeness, I think, is just a hallmark of America.
Employers have added 18.5 million jobs since April of 2020, still almost 4 million shy of what the economy was boasting before the pandemic. I'm Brody Carter, CBN News.
A lot of movement in the economy and employment picture, Gordon.
A lot of movement in the workforce, but I think the biggest news is the Federal Reserve signaling that they're going to start raising interest rates. Hopefully that will bring inflation and sort of tamp it down, but we're all experiencing it. Gas prices have eased a little bit since their peak just a month ago, but we need some relief from this inflation. It's going to eat away at all of us. And there seems to be no avoiding it right now. So if the Federal Reserve can sort of tap on the brake a little bit, and if the government can stop printing money and funding all these things and making the whole world awash in dollars, well, then maybe we can come back and come back really strong.